My name is Eleanor Mitchell, and I just turned 75 years old today. I was expecting a quiet birthday, maybe some flowers and a phone call from my son Robert. Instead, he showed up at my door, rushed me outside and roughly pushed me into a strange car. "Take her to the mountains," he told the driver with cold eyes. "This will be her last birthday." Before I could even process what was happening, the car pulled away. Through the window I saw my son watching, his face completely emotionless. If you're watching this video, please subscribe and let me know where you're viewing from. The story I'm about to tell shocked even me. Life before this shocking birthday had been fairly predictable. After teaching third grade for nearly 40 years at Lincoln Elementary, I settled into a comfortable retirement in the same small house where my late husband Frank and I had built our lives. Frank passed away 10 years ago from a sudden heart attack, leaving me alone but financially secure. We had always been careful with money, and between my teacher's pension and his life insurance, I had enough to live comfortably. Our only son, Robert, lives across town with his wife Stephanie and their 2 teenagers, Jessica and Michael. 4 years after Frank died, Robert was attentive, visiting weekly and calling almost daily. He helped with house repairs and took me grocery shopping when the weather was bad. I was grateful for his support but always tried not to be a burden. I valued my independence and managed most things on my own. But about a year ago, something changed in Robert. His visits became less frequent, and when he did come by, he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone. Our conversations, once warm and engaging, turned perfunctory. He started asking more questions about my finances, particularly about the money Frank had left in my savings. "Mom, have you thought about downsizing?" he asked during one visit. "This house is too big for just you. It's becoming a money pit." I dismissed his concerns. "This house is paid for, Robert. My expenses are minimal." I later learned from my neighbor Margaret that Robert's construction business was struggling. The economy had taken a downturn, and he had invested heavily in a development project that wasn't selling as expected. I wondered if his financial problems were behind his changed behavior, but I never confronted him directly. I didn't want to embarrass him. My daily life had a comfortable rhythm. Mornings started with coffee on my back porch, watching the birds at the feeder Frank had built. I tended my vegetable garden, took slow walks around the neighborhood, and attended my weekly book club at the library. Every Wednesday, I volunteered reading to children at the same school where I had taught. These small pleasures filled my days with purpose. My circle of friends had naturally shrunk over the years as people moved away to be closer to their children or passed on. Still, I maintained close friendships with Margaret next door, my former colleague Barbara, and Thomas, who had been Frank's best friend since college. Thomas moved to Arizona after his wife died, but we kept in touch through occasional phone calls. 3 months before my 75th birthday, I had a minor health scare. Nothing serious, just elevated blood pressure that caused me to feel dizzy at the supermarket. A kind stranger helped me to a bench, and the store manager called Robert. He arrived looking panicked and insisted on taking me to the emergency room despite my protests. The doctor simply adjusted my medication and sent me home, but Robert seemed unusually affected by the incident. He started talking about assisted living facilities. "You can't live alone anymore, Mom," he insisted. "What if something happens and no one is around to help?" "People my age have minor health issues, Robert," I countered. "That doesn't mean I need to give up my independence." These conversations became more frequent and increasingly tense. Robert brought brochures for retirement communities and care facilities. I threw them away as soon as he left. 2 weeks before my birthday, Robert visited with a folder of paperwork. "Just some documents to update your will and healthcare directives," he explained casually. "The lawyer said everything should be current." I trusted my son and signed where he indicated without reading carefully, a decision I would later regret deeply. Birthdays had always been modest affairs in our family. Frank would make me breakfast in bed, and we'd go out for a nice dinner. After he passed, Robert usually took me to lunch and brought a small gift. Nothing extravagant, which was perfectly fine with me. For my 75th, I expected the same. Perhaps a card from my grandchildren, and a phone call from my sister in Florida. I had no desire for a fuss. Age is just a number, after all. Those 75 did feel like something of a milestone. The morning of my birthday, I waited for Robert's call. By noon, when the phone hadn't rung, I felt a twinge of disappointment, but brushed it aside. He was busy, probably planning to stop by later. I made myself a cup of tea and settled in with a new mystery novel, determined to enjoy my day regardless. When the doorbell finally rang at 3 in the afternoon, I felt a wave of relief. Robert hadn't forgotten after all. Little did I know that this birthday would change everything between us, and that the next few hours would shake the foundation of trust one had built over a lifetime. The doorbell chimed again before I could reach the entryway. Robert never was the patient type. When I pulled open the door, his expression caught me off guard. Instead of the warm birthday wishes I expected, his face was tense, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, stepping inside without waiting for my invitation. He glanced at his watch immediately, something he did 3 more times in the first 5 minutes of his visit. "Thank you, dear," I replied, trying to hide my disappointment at his distracted manner. "I was beginning to think you might have forgotten." "Forget?"
No.
"Just been busy planning something special." He paced around my living room, peering occasionally out the window. "Actually, that's why I'm here. I have a surprise for you." Despite his odd behavior, my spirits lifted.
A surprise sounded lovely.
Perhaps he had reservations at a nice restaurant, or maybe he had arranged for my sister to visit from Florida. "That's sweet of you, Robert. Let me just freshen up a bit." "No time for that," he said abruptly. "We need to go now. The surprise is time-sensitive." Something felt off, but I pushed aside my concerns. This was my son after all. If he was acting strangely, surely there was a reasonable explanation. Perhaps he was still worried about my health scare, or maybe his business troubles were weighing on him. "At least let me get my purse and cardigan," I said, moving toward my bedroom. Robert followed close behind, hovering as I gathered my things. "Hurry, Mom. We're already running late." His impatience was unlike him, or at least unlike the son I had known before this past year. I noticed his hands were slightly shaking as he checked his phone, reading a text message with intense concentration. "Is everything all right?" I asked, placing a hand on his arm. He jerked away.
Fine.
"Everything's fine. Are you ready now?" When we stepped outside, I expected to see his familiar blue sedan in the driveway. Instead, a black car I didn't recognize idled at the curb, its engine running, windows tinted dark enough that I couldn't see the driver. "Whose car is that?" I asked, hesitating on the porch. "Just a service I hired for your special day," Robert answered, taking my elbow and guiding me forward with more force than necessary. "Come on, Mom. Don't make this difficult." The way he said those last words sent a chill through me. Make what difficult? But before I could voice my concerns, we reached the car, and Robert opened the back door. "Get in, Mom. The driver knows where to go." I peered into the dark interior, hesitating. "Aren't you coming with me?" "I'll meet you there. I have to pick up something first." His tone left no room for argument. Still reluctant, I slid into the back seat. The interior smelled of leather and something else, a chemical odor I couldn't place. The driver sat motionless, facing forward, cap pulled low over his eyes. As I settled in, Robert leaned down, speaking not to me but to the driver. His voice had changed, taking on a coldness I had never heard before. "Take her to the mountains," he said. "This will be her last birthday." My breath caught in my throat. Surely I had misheard. Or perhaps this was some strange joke. But the serious expression on his face as he slammed the door shut told me otherwise. Through the window, I watched my son return to his own car parked further down the street, not once looking back at me. The black car pulled away from the curb, carrying me away from my home and toward an unknown destination. In that moment, my mind raced through possibilities. Had I done something to anger him? Was this some elaborate birthday surprise gone wrong? Or was I in genuine danger? The implications of his words, "her last birthday," echoed in my head, each repetition more ominous than the last. I tried the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Child safety locks, I realized with growing horror. I was effectively trapped in a moving vehicle with a stranger, sent away by my own son with words that sounded disturbingly like a death sentence. The familiar streets of my neighborhood slipped away as we turned onto the highway. My hands trembled as I reached for my old flip phone in my purse. Whatever was happening, I needed help. But who would believe that my own son had put me in this situation? And worse, who would I call? Robert was always my emergency contact. As the car accelerated onto the highway, tears welled in my eyes. This was not how I had imagined spending my 75th birthday. Instead of celebration, I felt only betrayal and fear, emotions I never expected to associate with my only child. As the car merged onto the highway, panic seized my chest, constricting my breathing. I recognized the beginning of an anxiety attack, something I hadn't experienced since Frank's funeral. Forcing myself to take deep breaths, I tried to regain control. Panicking wouldn't help me understand what was happening, or how to escape it. "Excuse me," I called to the driver, my voice shakier than I intended. "There must be some mistake. I need to go back home." The driver remained silent, eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Did you hear me?" I tried again, louder this time. "I want to go home. Now." Still no response. It was as if I were invisible, my words mere whispers in the wind. This silent treatment only intensified my fear. Was the driver part of some plot? Was Robert paying this person to take me somewhere against my will? Through the windows, I watched as the city landscape gradually gave way to suburbs, then to scattered rural properties. We were heading west, toward the mountains that bordered our town. Under different circumstances, I might have enjoyed the scenery, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across green pastures. Now each mile that passed only increased my dread. I pulled out my flip phone again, flipping it open with trembling fingers. No signal. Of course. The mountains were notorious for poor reception. Even if I could call someone, what would I say? That my son had effectively kidnapped me on my birthday? It sounded absurd even to my own ears. As we drove, my mind replayed warning signs I had ignored. The sudden interest in my finances. The pressure to move to assisted living. The paperwork I had signed without reading. A horrible thought occurred to me. What if Robert had tricked me into signing something that gave him control over my assets? Or worse, what if those papers weren't just about healthcare directives, but something more sinister? 3 months ago, I had overheard a conversation between Robert and Stephanie when they thought I was napping on the sun porch. They were in the kitchen, voices low but distinct enough. "The insurance policy is substantial," Robert had said. "More than enough to cover everything and then some. But is it worth it?" Stephanie had asked. "She's your mother, Robert. We're talking about quality of life," he had responded. "And financial security for our family. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made." At the time, I had assumed they were discussing their own insurance or perhaps mine in relation to potential medical expenses. Now those words took on a more sinister meaning. Had Robert taken out an insurance policy on me? Was that what this was about? The car climbed higher into the mountains, taking sharp turns on increasingly narrow roads. I had no idea where we were. Having lived in the area my entire life, I thought I knew these mountains well, but we had turned onto unfamiliar routes, dirt roads that weren't on any tourist map. "Please," I tried once more, leaning forward toward the driver. "At least tell me where we're going." After what seemed like an eternity of silence, the driver finally spoke, his voice low and gruff. "Almost there." Those 2 words, the only acknowledgement of my existence since this journey began, somehow made everything more terrifying. We were approaching some destination, some endpoint to this journey that my son had orchestrated. I noticed the driver occasionally checking what appeared to be written directions, following some predetermined route. This wasn't a random drive into the mountains. Whoever this person was, they were taking me to a specific location, following instructions that Robert must have provided. My mind conjured terrible possibilities. Was Robert planning to have me declared incompetent? Committed to some facility against my will? Or was this something even worse? The phrase "her last birthday" haunted me. Could my own son actually wish me harm? I thought back to an argument we'd had 2 months ago, when Robert had brought a real estate agent to my house without warning. "The market is hot right now, Mom," he had insisted. "We could sell this place for triple what Dad paid for it. Think about it, you could have a nice little apartment and a good chunk of money in the bank." "This is my home, Robert. I had responded firmly. I'm not selling it. Not now, not ever. His face had darkened then, a flash of something cold crossing his features before he composed himself. You're being stubborn and selfish, he had said. Jessica and Michael will need college tuition soon. That money could help them. Your father and I already set up college funds for them, I had reminded him. This house has nothing to do with their education. He had stormed out that day, not visiting again for 2 weeks. When he did return, he brought those papers, the ones I had signed without reading properly. Had that been his plan all along? The car slowed suddenly, turning onto what was barely a road, more a dirt path cutting through dense pine forest. We bumped along for another 10 minutes before I spotted a structure ahead. A small cabin nestled among the trees. As we approached, I tried the door handles again, pulling desperately, but they remained locked. I considered breaking a window, but at my age, even if I managed it, where would I go? I didn't know where we were, had no phone signal, and the forest stretched endlessly in all directions. The car came to a stop in front of the cabin. No other vehicles were visible. The place looked deserted, windows dark. No smoke from the chimney despite the mountain chill. I sat frozen as the driver turned off the engine. My entire body trembled uncontrollably, a combination of fear, anger, and the dawning realization that whatever was about to happen, I was powerless to stop it. The driver's door opened. I heard footsteps circling the car, approaching my door. As the lock clicked and the door swung open, I pressed myself against the opposite side, as if those few inches might provide some protection. The setting sun illuminated the driver's face as he leaned down to look at me, and for the first time, I got a clear view of the person who had brought me to this isolated place. The mountain air rushed in as my door opened, carrying the scent of pine and earth. I remained pressed against the far side of the back seat, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might fail altogether. The driver leaned down, his face now fully visible in the golden light of the setting sun. Eleanor, he said, his voice suddenly gentler than before. Are you all right? You look terrified. I stared at him, unable to form words. Why was he acting concerned now, after an hour of silence? Was this part of some twisted game? The door locks, I finally managed to say. They were engaged. I couldn't get out. Child safety features, he explained. These service cars have them automatically enabled. I'm sorry if that frightened you. He offered his hand, but I ignored it, still unwilling to trust this stranger who had been complicit in whatever scheme Robert had concocted. I'm not getting out, I declared, summoning every ounce of defiance in my 75-year-old body. Not until you tell me exactly what's going on and why my son told you this would be my last birthday. The driver's expression changed, confusion crossing his features. Last birthday? I don't know anything about that. Robert just hired me to bring you to the cabin for a surprise. I didn't believe him. Then why wouldn't you answer me during the drive? Why act like I wasn't even there? He had the decency to look embarrassed. Strict instructions. I wasn't supposed to tell you anything about where we were going or why. Robert was very clear about maintaining the surprise. Surprise, I repeated bitterly. Is that what you call abducting an elderly woman and taking her to an isolated cabin in the mountains? The driver stepped back, seeming genuinely startled by my words. Abducting? No, ma'am. This is a birthday surprise. Robert organized everything. Still skeptical, I refused to move. The driver sighed, then reached into his pocket. I flinched, expecting the worst, but he merely pulled out his phone. Look, he said, turning the screen toward me. These are the text messages from your son. He hired my car service specifically. I squinted at the small screen, reading the exchange. Robert. Need transportation for my mother's 75th birthday surprise. Private cabin at Pine Ridge. Must be a complete surprise. Don't tell her anything during the drive. Driver, understood. Complete discretion. What time? Robert. 3:30 p.m. pickup. Address attached. Others will already be at the cabin. Others. My eyes lingered on that word. What others? I don't understand, I said, my voice smaller now. If this is just a surprise party, why would Robert say this would be my last birthday? The driver shrugged. I honestly don't know what he meant by that. if he said it at all. My instructions were simply to bring you here safely. Despite my lingering suspicion, I finally relented and allowed myself to be helped from the car. My legs were stiff from the long drive and anxiety, causing me to stumble slightly on the uneven ground. The driver steadied me with a respectful hand on my elbow. The cabin stood dark and silent before us, its windows revealing nothing of what might wait inside. In the fading daylight, it looked almost picturesque, the kind of place Frank and I might have rented for a weekend getaway in our younger years. "Are there others here already?" I asked, still not entirely convinced this wasn't some elaborate trap. "That was my understanding," the driver replied. "Shall we go in?" With extreme reluctance, I allowed him to guide me toward the cabin. Each step up the gravel path felt like moving closer to some unknown fate. What would I find inside? Robert waiting to apologize for the misunderstanding? Or something more sinister? At the door, I hesitated. I still don't understand why Robert wouldn't come with me. He said he needed to pick up something important, the driver offered. He should be arriving soon. Taking a deep breath, I nodded for him to open the door. He turned the handle, pushing it inward to reveal complete darkness beyond. I instinctively stepped back, bumping into the driver behind me. "Hello," I called out, my voice wavering. "Is anyone there?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then suddenly, the room flooded with light. "Surprise! Happy birthday, Eleanor," I gasped, my hand flying to my chest. The cabin, far from being abandoned, was filled with people. Familiar faces beamed at me from around a beautifully decorated space. Balloons and streamers hung from the wooden beams. A banner reading "Happy 75th Birthday, Eleanor" stretched across one wall. My mind struggled to process this shift from terror to celebration. I recognized Margaret from next door, Barbara from the book club, cousins from upstate I hadn't seen in years, and several former colleagues from the school where I had taught. And there, stepping forward with a warm smile, was Thomas, Frank's best friend whom I hadn't seen since he moved to Arizona 3 years ago. "Thomas," I whispered, scarcely believing my eyes. "You came all this way? Wouldn't miss your big day, Ellie," he said, using the nickname only Frank had ever used. "Robert arranged everything, flew me in specially." Speaking of Robert, I glanced around but didn't see him among the gathered faces. This surprise party explained some things but not everything. Not those ominous words I had heard him speak to the driver. As my friends surrounded me with hugs and birthday wishes, I tried to match their enthusiasm, to act appropriately surprised and delighted. But beneath my smiles, confusion and suspicion still swirled. Something still didn't add up. The driver quietly slipped away as I was guided further into the cabin. The interior was warm and inviting, a fire crackling in the stone fireplace, the dining table laden with food and a large birthday cake at its center. Clearly, significant planning had gone into this event. "Isn't this wonderful?" Margaret gushed beside me. "Robert has been organizing this for months. Sworn us all to secrecy." "Yes, wonderful," I echoed, my smile not quite reaching my eyes. "Where is Robert, by the way?" "He texted that he's on his way," Thomas explained. "Said he had to pick up a special gift." I nodded, accepting a glass of champagne from Barbara, while continuing to scan the room. It was then that I overheard a snippet of conversation from near the kitchen area. "Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything about the plan?" a female voice whispered. "Stephanie, Robert's wife." "No way," a male voice responded. "Everything's set. After this weekend it's all taken care of." My hand tightened around the champagne flute. The plan. After this weekend. Taken care of. These phrases, innocent enough in another context, took on sinister meaning given everything that had happened today. My body began trembling again, not from fear this time but from a growing anger. Whatever game Robert was playing, whatever plan he had set in motion, I was determined to uncover the truth before this birthday celebration was over. The party continued around me, a surreal contrast to the fear I'd experienced during the car ride. Friends from various chapters of my life mingled in the cozy cabin, sharing stories and laughter. Under normal circumstances, I would have been touched by such a gathering, but my mind remained fixated on those overheard words in Robert's absence. Thomas stayed close to my side, as if sensing my unease. "Are you all right, Ellie?" he asked quietly during a lull in the conversations. "You seem distracted." I hesitated, unsure how much to share. Thomas had been Frank's closest friend for decades, someone I had always trusted implicitly. If anyone would believe my concerns, it would be him. "Something strange is happening, Thomas," I admitted in a low voice. "When Robert put me in the car, he told the driver this would be my last birthday. Those were his exact words." Thomas's expression shifted from concern to confusion. "That doesn't sound like Robert. Are you sure you heard correctly?" "I know what I heard," I insisted. "And there's more. Robert has been pressuring me to sell my house, move to assisted living. He had me sign papers I didn't read carefully. And just now, I overheard Stephanie talking about the plan and something being taken care of after this weekend." Thomas frowned, his forehead creasing in thought. "That is concerning. But maybe there's an explanation we're not seeing. Robert went to a lot of trouble to arrange this party, flying me in from Arizona, bringing all these people together. To create witnesses?" I suggested darkly. "To establish that I was happy and well before whatever happens next?" Before Thomas could respond, the cabin door swung open, and Robert entered, carrying a large gift bag. The room erupted in fresh greetings, and my son made his way through the crowd, smiling and accepting pats on the back for his successful surprise. When he finally reached me, his smile faltered slightly at my cold expression. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. "Were you surprised?" "Absolutely," I replied, my voice steady despite my churning emotions. "I had no idea what to expect when you pushed me into that car and told the driver it would be my last birthday." Robert's face paled visibly. "What? I never said that." "I heard you clearly, Robert. Those exact words." He glanced around nervously, seeming relieved that no one else was close enough to hear our exchange. "You must have misunderstood, Mom. Why would I say something like that?" "That's precisely what I've been wondering," I said, maintaining eye contact. "Along with why you've been so interested in my finances lately, and why you had me sign those papers without explaining them properly." Robert's expression hardened. "You're being paranoid. This is a birthday party, for God's sake. I went to all this trouble to make your day special. And you're accusing me of what exactly?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I intend to find out." Our tense exchange was interrupted by Thomas announcing it was time for cake. The gathering crowded around as the lights dimmed and 75 candles blazed on a beautiful 3-tiered cake. Everyone sang happy birthday, their faces glowing in the warm candlelight. "Make a wish, Eleanor," someone called out. I looked at the flickering candles, then at my son standing across the table, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I wished for truth, for clarity, and blew out every candle in one determined breath. As cake was being served, Robert presented me with the gift bag he had brought. "This is why I was delayed," he explained, his voice carrying for the benefit of the other guests. "A special gift I had to pick up personally." Inside the bag was a beautifully framed photo of Frank and me on our wedding day, restored and enlarged from the original that had begun to fade. Despite my suspicions, I felt tears spring to my eyes. It was a thoughtful gift, one that showed care and consideration. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "It's beautiful." For a moment, I wondered if I had misjudged the situation entirely. Could I have misheard those words at the car? Was my imagination running wild due to age and isolation? The moment of doubt passed quickly when I noticed Robert and Stephanie exchange a meaningful glance across the room. Whatever was happening, my instincts told me to remain vigilant. As the evening progressed, I maintained the appearance of an appreciative birthday celebrant, while carefully observing my son's interactions. He seemed to be checking his watch frequently, occasionally stepping outside to make phone calls. During one such absence, I made my way to where he had left his coat draped over a chair. Feeling slightly guilty but determined, I quickly checked the pockets. Nothing unusual, just his car keys and a receipt from a gas station. I was about to abandon my amateur sleuthing when I noticed his tablet peeking out from a side compartment of his laptop bag nearby. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, I slipped the tablet out and retreated to the relative privacy of the hallway leading to the bedrooms. The screen lit up at my touch, thankfully not password protected. Robert had always been careless with his devices, a fact that might now work in my favor. I quickly navigated to his email, searching for anything related to me or this cabin. What I found made my blood run cold. There were multiple exchanges with a real estate agent about my house, discussing potential listing prices and the best time to put it on the market. One email specifically mentioned, "Once power of attorney is secured, we can proceed without complications." Power of attorney. The papers he had me sign. I scrolled further, finding an email to a care facility called Sunny Pines, inquiring about their memory care unit and availability for a new resident requiring full-time supervision. My hands shaking with anger and betrayal, I continued searching until I found a document attachment labeled Mitchell Estate Plan. Opening it revealed a detailed timeline that made everything horrifyingly clear. March 15th. Secure POA complete. April 10th. Medical evaluation complete. May 20th. Birthday weekend in progress. May 22nd. Move to Sunny Pines. June 1st. House listing goes live. June-July. Estate liquidation. I stared at the screen, the methodical dismantling of my life laid out in bullet points. The last birthday comment suddenly made perfect sense. Robert hadn't been threatening my life. He had been referring to this as the last birthday I would celebrate in my own home, with my independence intact. The sound of approaching footsteps startled me. I quickly closed the email and slipped the tablet back into Robert's bag, making it to the bathroom just as someone walked down the hallway. I leaned against the closed door, my heart racing, mind reeling from what I had discovered. My own son had been planning to declare me incompetent, sell my home, and place me in a care facility, all without my knowledge or consent. The birthday party wasn't a celebration. It was the final step before implementing this plan. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared older than I felt, but her eyes burned with a clarity and determination that belied her 75 years. I might be aging, but I was far from incompetent, and I refused to be treated as such. Taking a deep breath, I rejoined the party, a plan of my own beginning to form. The evening had delivered a stunning twist indeed, but the final act of this birthday drama was still mine to write. I returned to the main room with newfound clarity, viewing the gathering through different eyes. What I had initially perceived as a touching birthday celebration now revealed itself as something more calculated. Looking around at the smiling faces, I wondered how many of them knew about Robert's true intentions. Were they all complicit, or were most of them innocent participants in his scheme? The party continued in full swing, with music playing and conversations flowing. I accepted birthday wishes with gracious smiles while internally formulating my strategy. Direct confrontation might be dismissed as the ramblings of a confused elderly woman, especially in front of this crowd. I needed irrefutable evidence and the right moment. Thomas approached with a fresh glass of champagne. "Feeling better?" he asked. "Much," I replied, deciding to confide in him. "Thomas, I need your help. I found something on Robert's tablet that confirms my suspicions." His expression grew serious as I quietly explained what I had discovered. Unlike earlier, he didn't attempt to rationalize or dismiss my concerns. "That's extremely troubling, Ellie," he said when I finished. "What do you want to do?" "I need to confront him, but strategically, not emotionally. And I need witnesses who won't think I'm just a confused old woman." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Count me in. And Margaret too, I'd say. She's known you for decades." I squeezed his hand gratefully, then circulated through the party, pulling Margaret aside to brief her as well. Her reaction mirrored Thomas's concern. "That sneaky little," she began before composing herself. "Sorry, Eleanor, but I always thought Robert was too interested in your house. Remember when he brought that real estate agent over without telling you?" "Exactly," I confirmed. "I need both of you nearby when I confront him." As we finalized our impromptu plan, I noticed Robert and Stephanie having an intense discussion in the corner. Their body language suggested disagreement, with Stephanie repeatedly shaking her head. I couldn't hear their words, but their expressions told me enough. When they separated, Stephanie looked troubled. Taking advantage of the moment, I approached her. "Stephanie, is everything all right?" You seem upset. My daughter-in-law startled at my sudden appearance. Oh, Eleanor. Yes, everything's fine. Just discussing some logistics for tomorrow. Tomorrow? I prompted innocently. What's happening tomorrow? She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. Just, when everyone will be heading home. Transportation arrangements and such. I see, I said, maintaining a pleasant expression. And what about me? What are my transportation arrangements? Stephanie blanched. I think Robert wanted to discuss that with you privately. It's nothing to worry about. Of course not, I agreed, patting her arm reassuringly. Nothing to worry about at all. I walked away, leaving her looking even more uncomfortable than before. The interaction confirmed that Stephanie was aware of the plan but perhaps not entirely comfortable with it. This potential crack in their united front might prove useful. As the evening progressed, I waited for the right moment. It came when Robert called for everyone's attention to make a toast. I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate my mother's 75th birthday, he began, raising his glass. It means the world to her, and to me, to have so many loved ones gathered here. He continued with platitudes about the passage of time and the importance of family, each word ringing hollow to my ears given what I now knew. When he finished his toast with, "To many more happy years for my mother," I decided the time had come. I stood slowly, deliberately, my own glass in hand. I'd like to say a few words as well, I announced, my voice stronger than I expected. The room quieted, all eyes turning to me. Robert's smile faltered slightly. I'm deeply touched by this gathering, I began. Seeing so many familiar faces reminds me of the rich life I've been fortunate to lead. A life built on honesty, trust, and respect. I paused, making eye contact with various guests before focusing on my son. Which is why I'm so troubled by what I discovered today. Robert, would you care to explain to our guests why you had me sign power of attorney documents without my knowledge? Or perhaps you could share your timeline for moving me to Sunny Pines Care Facility next week and selling my home. The room fell completely silent. Robert's face drained of color. Mom, he said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even to my ears. What are you talking about? I think you're confused. Am I? I countered, moving toward him. Confused about the emails you exchanged with real estate agents about listing my house? Confused about the documents on your tablet outlining your Mitchell estate plan? Was I also confused when I heard you tell the driver this would be my last birthday? Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Robert's eyes darted around the room, assessing the damage to his carefully constructed narrative. You've been going through my private correspondence, he deflected, trying to sound indignant. That's an invasion of privacy. And plotting to declare me incompetent and sell my home without my consent isn't? I challenged, my voice rising. It's not like that, Robert insisted. You had that health scare. The doctor said your blood pressure is unstable. I'm trying to ensure you're properly cared for before something serious happens. By deceiving me? By making decisions about my life without even discussing them with me. By now, most guests were shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether they were witnessing a legitimate confrontation or the confused accusations of an elderly woman. Thomas stepped forward, placing himself supportively at my side. Robert, he said calmly, I've known your mother for 40 years. There's nothing wrong with her mental acuity. If you're concerned about her well-being, there are ways to address that without resorting to subterfuge. You don't understand, Robert snapped. She refuses to be reasonable about her situation. She's living alone in a house too big for her, with stairs she could fall down, refusing any help. What am I supposed to do? Wait until she breaks a hip or worse? You're supposed to talk to me, I answered, keeping my voice level despite my anger. I'm your mother, not a child or an invalid. I'm perfectly capable of participating in decisions about my own life. Stephanie, who had remained silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Tell her the truth, Robert. Tell her why you're really doing this. All eyes turned to my son, whose face had grown increasingly flushed. For a moment he seemed on the verge of another denial. Then his shoulders sagged. The business is failing, he admitted quietly. We're facing bankruptcy. The development project went under, and I took out loans using my house as collateral. We're about to lose everything. The revelation hung in the air. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Anger at his deception, disappointment in his methods, but also compassion for his predicament. So your solution was to take control of my assets? I asked, more sad than angry now. To put me away in a home and liquidate everything I own to solve your financial problems? I was desperate, he said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't see another way out. You could have talked to me, I pointed out. Asked for help directly instead of going behind my back. Would you have helped? He challenged. You've always been so independent, so insistent on keeping your money for your own security. You never gave me the chance to decide, I responded. You made assumptions and then acted on them in the most underhanded way possible. The party guests, witnessing this family drama unfold, began to quietly gather their belongings. Margaret stepped forward, addressing the room. Perhaps we should give Eleanor and Robert some privacy to discuss this, she suggested tactfully. As people filed out with awkward goodbyes, Robert sank into a chair, looking defeated. Thomas and Margaret remained, standing protectively near me. What happens now? Robert asked once we were alone except for Thomas, Margaret, and Stephanie. Are you going to press charges for the power of attorney? I forged your signature on some of those documents. The admission stunned me. I hadn't realized the deception went that far. I don't want to see you in legal trouble, Robert, I said after a long moment. You're still my son, despite everything. But things will have to change between us. Trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. Stephanie approached, tears in her eyes. I tried to talk him out of it, she said. I told him it wasn't right. But he was so scared of losing everything, of disappointing the kids. Fear makes people do terrible things, I acknowledged. But it doesn't excuse them. As the confrontation wound down, one thing became abundantly clear. The relationship with my son would never be the same. The birthday that began with fear and continued with betrayal had exposed truths that couldn't be unseen or forgotten. Whatever path forward we found would have to be built on new foundations, with clear boundaries and painful lessons learned. The drive back to my home the following morning was quiet, with Thomas behind the wheel of his rental car. We had stayed the night at the cabin, Thomas and Margaret insisting on remaining with me while Robert and Stephanie departed in uncomfortable silence. The other guests had long since gone, leaving behind half-eaten cake and deflated balloons that seemed to perfectly symbolize the collapsed celebration. Are you all right? Thomas asked as we turned onto my street. You've barely said a word since we left. I'm processing, I replied honestly. 75 years old, and life can still blindside you. He reached over to pat my hand. That's what makes it interesting, I suppose. Despite everything, I smiled. Thomas had always possessed Frank's gift for finding silver linings. The house looked exactly as I had left it, which struck me as oddly surprising. After such a seismic shift in my family dynamics, I had half expected the physical world to reflect the change. But my garden continued to bloom, the mail sat waiting in the box, and the neighborhood children still played across the street, oblivious to my personal drama. I'll stay a few days, Thomas offered as he carried my overnight bag inside. If that's all right with you. More than all right, I said gratefully. I could use the company. True to his word, Thomas remained for the next week, a steadying presence as I took immediate steps to protect myself legally. Margaret drove us to meet with a lawyer I had known through the school board, a sharp-minded woman in her 60s named Judith Preston. Fortunately, Judith explained after reviewing my situation, forged power of attorney documents aren't legally binding. We'll file paperwork immediately to nullify anything Robert submitted. I also recommend updating your will and establishing a legitimate power of attorney with someone you trust implicitly. I glanced at Thomas, who had accompanied me to the meeting. Would you consider it? I know Arizona is far, but I'd be honored, he replied without hesitation. In the following days, I met with my doctor for a complete cognitive assessment, which I passed with flying colors. Your mind is sharper than many patients half your age, Dr. Chun assured me. There's absolutely no medical justification for questioning your competence. I had the documentation sent to both my lawyer and to Robert, a pointed reminder that his claims about my health were unfounded. 3 weeks after the birthday fiasco, Robert finally called. Our conversation was stilted, painful in its formality where once there had been easy affection. "I've been seeing a therapist," he told me, trying to understand why I thought such deception was justified. "And what have you learned?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "That I've been carrying a lot of fear. About money, about failure, about not living up to Dad's example." His voice cracked slightly. "It doesn't excuse what I did, but I'm trying to do better." "I'm glad to hear that," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, he was still my child and I wanted healing for him. "I also wanted you to know that we've put our house on the market," he continued. "It should cover most of our debts. We're downsizing to an apartment until we get back on our feet." The irony wasn't lost on me. "So you'll be the one moving after all?" "Yes," he acknowledged. "Seems fitting somehow." We ended the call with tentative plans for him to visit in a month, with the understanding that rebuilding trust would be a long, gradual process. I wasn't ready to forgive completely, but I was willing to leave the door open to the possibility. With the immediate crisis behind me, I turned my attention to creating a more robust support network beyond just family. I joined a senior advocacy group that educated older adults about their legal rights and financial security. The experience of nearly losing my autonomy had awakened me to how vulnerable the elderly can be, even at the hands of those who claim to love them. Thomas extended his stay by several weeks, during which our friendship deepened into something neither of us had anticipated. After 50 years of knowing each other as friends through Frank, we discovered a connection that felt both surprising and entirely natural. "I'm too old for romance," I protested when he first tentatively broached the subject. "And I'm not," he countered with a laugh, his 78 years sitting lightly on his still straight shoulders. "We're not teenagers, Ellie. We're not looking to start families or build careers together. But companionship, caring, enjoying whatever time we have left together. Is there really an age limit on that?" Put that way, it made perfect sense. Thomas returned to Arizona to settle his affairs, promising to come back within a month. We planned to split our time between both homes, maintaining our independence while sharing our lives. It wasn't the future I had envisioned, but at 75, I had learned that life continues to offer unexpected turns. My relationship with Robert remained complicated. True to his word, he entered therapy and began the slow work of addressing the fears and assumptions that had led to his betrayal. Our interactions were cautious, the easy trust of before now replaced with careful boundaries and explicit communication. It was painful but also necessary. I no longer accepted his assertions about what was best for me without question, and he was learning to respect my autonomy even when he disagreed with my choices. As my 76th birthday approached, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary lessons of the previous year. I had discovered both the fragility of familial trust and the unexpected strength of my own resolve. I had learned that age did not diminish my right to self-determination, nor did it exempt me from life's ongoing challenges and opportunities. The celebration for my 76th was deliberately low-key, a small dinner at my home with Thomas, Margaret, and a few close friends. Robert and his family were invited but seated at the table rather than orchestrating events from behind the scenes. Before cutting the cake, I raised my glass for a toast. Last year at this time, I thought I was celebrating my final birthday as an independent woman. I began, meeting Robert's eyes briefly before continuing. Instead, it became the first birthday of a new chapter. One where I learned that advocacy begins with ourselves, that boundaries are acts of love, and that life continues to surprise us at every age. I looked around at the dear faces gathered at my table, each one representing a different facet of my journey. To growing older with grace, wisdom, and just enough stubbornness to keep things interesting, I concluded with a smile. The glasses clinked, the cake was shared, and I silently marveled at how differently this birthday had unfolded compared to the last. No secret plans, no hidden agendas, just honest celebration and genuine connection. Later, as Thomas and I sat on the porch swing watching the sunset, he squeezed my hand gently. "Happy birthday, Ellie. Here's to many more, each one on your own terms." I rested my head against his shoulder, feeling a contentment that had seemed impossible a year ago. Life at 76 was not what I had expected, but it was rich with hard-won wisdom and new possibilities. The journey ahead might not always be smooth, but I would face it on my feet, not as a passenger in someone else's plan. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone tried to take control of your life for your own good? How did you respond? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this tale of standing up for yourself at any age resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, it's never too late to write your own story.